I am one of your hosts, George Joan, with green hair today. And I am joined as ever by the man, the myth, the tale told across galaxies. Mr. Travis Croft, how are you, sir?
I'm fine and dandy. It was May the 4th yesterday, so
Yes.
we're a little late. We would normally have recorded it on May the
We
4th,
would,
but
yeah.
but you were lucky enough to be gifted a ticket to
Mm-hmm.
see the new Marvel film, which we
Yes.
unfortunately cannot discuss this
No.
week because no one was giving me free tickets to things. I
You're
already
the
had
talent, I'm the management.
I had tickets to see it next week, unfortunately, because
Mm.
we waited too long and we couldn't get in to see it at any of the non-shithouse cinemas.
Mm.
But yeah, the ones that are anywhere near me. So we
Mm.
will be back with Doctor Strange. I ain't trying to try my damnedest to stay spoiler free, but I don't like my chances.
If you have watched any of the trailers, they do a pretty good job of spoiling a lot of the reveals themselves.
That's a damn shame.
Yeah, it's a they've become their own worst enemy in many ways. But anyway, yes. So yesterday was May the Fourth be with you, and for those who don't know, I work in the geek culture industry. And yesterday at work, I was wishing everyone May the Fourth be with you. Most people had no idea what I was talking about.
Really? Are these young people or old people buying things for
It
young
was
people?
young and old. It was like, okay, these are people who clearly should know about Star Wars at some point in their life. It's been a generational event now. And yet they were just like, what? I'm like, May the Fourth be with you. It's like, yeah, it is all day. I'm like, what? So
Wow, we shouldn't be allowed. You should get your gamers privileges revoked at that point.
yeah,
Like
yeah, shouldn't you?
I think it's a stupid thing personally. Like I was all over my social media yesterday, and I'm like, this is lame.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
it's a
because it
relatively
is.
modern conceit. I reckon it's probably, I reckon it's been kicking around now for about 15, 16 years or something, really. I mean, I remember, and Shay will be able to remember this as when she was living in Mooney Ponds, with my ex-wife, we went to the local Coles late at night and
Mm.
went through all of the Cocoa Pop boxes trying to find the right colored of lightsaber spoon that they had in there as part of a May the 4th promotion. We got it. I wanted a red one, damn it.
I am judging you.
And we didn't buy all the Cocoa Pops we opened. Ooh,
You are the reason society is
it's the
failing,
way it is. And they say society's falling apart now, as that was David Bowie. It started in 2000 and whatever that was. The Mooney Ponds Coles is the center of the universe. If you know that,
When something goes wrong there, it just echoes out
it's the
through time.
butterfly effect. It's just echoed out from the Coles in Mooney Ponds to, here we are today with Putin and Trump.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but clearly at that point in time, you had idle hands.
Indeed. Oh, it's a segue, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm good at these now, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I'm putting effort in. Well, this week, our chain movie, we followed on from last week's cult classic, shall we say, of Barbed Wire.
That's
With
extraordinarily generous.
It is, yes. But surprisingly, when I was talking about it with people in the store, they're like, oh, I love that movie. Yeah, you would. You would. You're the kind of person who would.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
But we followed the talent of Jack Noseworthy from that movie into one of my guilty pleasure movies of Idle Hands, starring Devon Sawa and Jessica Alba, with Seth Green and Eldon Henson, who have all kind of gone on to make their own names in various portions of the Hollywood program, shall we say. So
it's very generous to call Devon Sawa's gone on to anything other than being a has-been.
he's got a strange cult following.
To girls who liked him when they were young, it's like people who go to Backstreet Boys concerts now.
Oh, incidentally, because of your comments about my blonde hair last week,
Mm-hmm.
whilst I was having a second round of bleaching done pre-greening, I was in the shower where there was a Google Home set up, and the delightful Siren Divine, who was doing my hair for me, put on a whole ton of all of that music. And
What would that music be inclusive of?
I used to think
I'm hoping
um,
there was some NSYNC in there.
there was definitely NSYNC. I think there was Backstreet Boys, and some. I think there might have been a little bit of Justin Bieber played as well.
All I can say is my work here is done.
Yes, yes,
I
you.
can, yeah.
I have got a tally board somewhere in the corners of my mind of the amount of times that you hurt me for no reason.
It was a good haircut, and I was just calling it away. I was just saying what everyone else was thinking. That's all.
Sure you were. Sure you were. But
But
yes, we
it's
followed
less
on.
Justin Timberlake this week, and
Mhm.
but
Wait,
sorry to interrupt you.
no, I was just going to say we followed on Jack Noseworthy, who is also in this movie with Vivica A. Fox. And we are talking about Idle Hands, ladies and gentlemen.
We might as well. We've talked about it, given them the taster of this. We should probably move on and get into it.
Yeah, let's go into
I've
these
never
synopsis.
seen this film before.
Mm.
I must have missed this one in the late 90s.
Mhm.
I think I thought it looked stupid.
Mhm.
And I think it's fair to say, given the 23 years have passed since then, I was correct. This
Yes,
film
it is
is
stupid.
stupid.
Mhm.
But that said, I am fairly certain that people who made it would be quite comfortable with me saying that they made a stupid film.
Yes.
Um, it's not attempting to be anything else other than a big, dumb, stupid late 90s stoner film, really. I mean, this film kind
Yeah.
of would
Yeah.
be a precursor, I feel like, to things like Harold and Kumar.
Yeah, it's an odd medley of kind of American Pie meets Evil Dead 2 by way of slight variation of Cheech and Chong, and then just kind of smushed together. And it's like, okay, there you go. And it kind of works.
Yeah, and you got to add that sprinkling
Mm.
of late 90s teen sex romp. I mean,
Yes.
if we think about the time this film came out in 1999, we'd had two Scream films by now.
Yes.
I think maybe, yeah, at least two, at least one. The first one came out in 96. I don't remember when the sequel came out. We're doing about then. We
Mm.
had, of course, the I Know What You Did Last Summer films,
Mhm.
one and two.
Yep.
Less said about the second one, the better.
Mhm.
We had The Faculty, when you have a Robert Rodriguez,
I
film.
love that
It's a
movie.
great, great movie. The Species movies.
Mhm.
So it was a good time horror had sort of come back a little bit after
Yeah.
taking a break there for a while. It was back in vogue in the late 90s. And the other great trend of the late 90s film was the return of a teen sex romp, as we sort of
Mhm.
hinted at before. You had the American Pie films.
Mhm.
Um, there are a whole bunch of other ones that I can't think of right now. She's All That,
Yeah, it was like,
Clueless to a lesser extent.
yeah, strange, so like teen, mildly sexified updates of Shakespeare plays, that sort of era.
Bet with tits,
Yeah,
preferably,
yeah,
or at least more sexually explicit than
yes.
again, like when that kind of scene sex romp went away,
Mhm.
gone away again. Really, I don't think they make them anymore.
Mhm.
But they were in for 5 minutes with the success of American Pie, and in
Yeah.
this film, as you sort of notice, kind of a Frankenstein's monster of all the hip trends that were going on in the late 90s. Though I guess the one interesting angle was the stoner film. I don't know, remember being a whole lot of stoner films in the late 90s. So where that exactly? I mean, that's almost the Kevin Smith influence there, really. If you sort of like,
Mm.
it would have been great if it had been a Jay and Silent Bob cameo in there somehow. That would have been amazing. Um, I don't know. Kevin was a little bit too successful in the late 90s for that kind of shit. And we have some great icons of the time in Devon Sawa. Sawa or Sava?
Sawa. Devon Sawa.
Sawa?
Mhm.
I've never been exactly sure how to pronounce that.
Devon
And
Sawa.
the Seth Green
Mhm.
and Eldon Henson are sort of Jessica Alba. very, very young Jessica Alba, just at the start of her career,
This
really.
this would have probably been about the same time that she was doing, or just either starting or mid Dark Angel, if you remember that TV
No,
series
I
she
do,
was
the
in.
James Cameron one, right?
Yeah.
So even the cast screams 90s.
Yeah.
2000 she started Dark Angel, so
Oh, shit,
just
so that was
after
just
this.
after this. Yeah.
Um, and I would be lying if I said I actually liked it. It was distracting.
Mm,
It's about the nicest thing I can say about it. I didn't hate it. I mean, you can certainly compare it to a film like Barbed Wire from the week before, which was low budget titillation as well.
mhm,
A different kind of titillation to this one,
mhm.
but I think this was significantly more successful than that.
Yeah,
We should talk
absolutely.
about the actual plot for a second because I think we skipped that this week.
Yeah. So, Anton Tobias, Devon Sawa, he is a slacker, stoner, lazy ass punk, essentially, who lusts after his neighbor Molly, played by Jessica Alba, and they find out through him being really just out of touch with what's going on in the real world that there is a killer on the loose. And in the first kind of 25-30 minutes of the movie, we find out that it's him, or at least part of him.
What
His
becomes part of him? He's not the one. Is he initially the killer or not? I can't really tell. But Tiller,
no,
it, it-
he is. I think he is the killer, at least of the ones that happen in that town. His right hand gets possessed by the devil, and it goes around killing people whilst he's asleep. Is the intonation, and it becomes so desperate to kill that he starts acting out and doing the whole like kind of Bruce Campbell-esque fighting with his own body kind of thing, with the notion of finding apparently a chosen person to sacrifice to take straight to hell. Don't quite know why that is, but this possessed spirit, whether it is the spirit of the devil or just some demon or something like that, we don't know. But Vivica A. Fox, who's Debbie LaCure, is some kind of druidic priest who is out on a mission to kill it and send it back to hell. And hijinks ensue.
you make a fair point there. But not a lot of the plot is actually explained terribly well at all. This is not a film that feels the need to go into great level of exposition about
Mhm.
why what's happening is happening and
Yeah,
why people are doing what they're doing.
yeah,
They just do what they do, and what happens happens. And
yeah,
you know what? It's kind of refreshing, and it kind of works. As I said, I
yeah,
wasn't a huge fan of this, but it gets in and it gets out. It does what it does in 90 minutes. It's
yeah.
utterly unpretentious. It's the anti the Batman. Like it's half the length of the Batman.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's a film as good as the Batman,
It's
which
trying to be Batman.
I would like to get a director. Could we get Rodman Flender in to come in and maybe do a Batman film in under 90 minutes, preferably? He's still
Any
kicking around.
superhero movie in under 90 minutes would be fine.
Under 2 hours, I'd be happy with that. But
Yeah.
I think if you're doing to do something long and ponderous like the Batman, I guess you need a little bit more runway to tell a story.
Mm.
But in something ridiculous like this, you don't want people asking questions. You
Yeah.
don't want people sitting there thinking, well, why exactly does Vivica Fox want to kill and pretend this
Mm.
thing? How does she know what it is? Is she
Mm.
actually the nun she's dressed up as?
Mhm.
How does she know all this shit? Where did she
This
get that
is
camper van from?
this is essentially a paint by numbers movie where they've just kind of gone, okay, we need a clueless protagonist. Pop that in. We need a cute neighbor. Pop that in. We need two best friends. Let's make them stoners too. And every character is kind of a stereotype that you've seen 100 times, but it just kind of works. It gets the story moving. It keeps it going, and everyone's generally serviceable in their role.
It just sort of goes, and everybody's just so. I could go further than saying serviceable. I'd say for the most part, they are excellent at doing what they're doing in this role. I'm not saying But Seth and Eldon deserved the Academy Award nomination for this. But if you want two guys to play, clueless, skeezy stoners, you could do a lot worse than those guys because they just did it really well. It's a bit like, going back to Harold and Kumar. I mean, those guys just did it, right? They did it so well.
It's the thing about the chemistry of them.
And they just, I wouldn't, I mean, I don't know, but I assume they smoked a lot of weed when they were younger, and maybe they still do. You can usually tell when people are faking it, or at the very least that they don't understand, how this kind of thing works. And Devon Sawa he's actually pretty decent at being a freaking clueless moron stoner. I mean, I don't know. That's probably why he has no career beyond this, in the sense of like, what is the last thing you saw this? What is the last thing you saw this guy in?
The last movie I saw him in, it would have been the next year, Final Destination.
So 22 years ago, and he's still working though,
Yeah.
And I'm just looking. He was in Slackers in 2000. I think I saw that at some point.
Okay.
He was in the new series of Chucky, which I did not see.
He was in The Fanatic. The isn't that Fred Durst's movie?
Yeah, I think it was actually. Yeah. No, you're not talking about the De Niro Wesley Snipes one.
No, this one's the John Travolta.
That's the Fan, right? Not the Fanatic.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think my point is made. I rest my case. Devon Sawa, he's not got much of a career anymore. But I think in this, he's absolutely perfectly cast. And those three guys get along really well. They have great chemistry together. Seth and Eldon in particular have amazing chemistry. And I think that they have a highlight of a film to the picture for me when they're on screen. Jessica Alba doesn't have a lot to do. She looks good. That's probably what she's really in this film for. She plays a very decent love interest for Anton. So that and the silliness of a plot, it just kind of just drives forward, and it's just kind of light and fluffy and fun for a teen horror sex comedy stoner flick thing. And you don't it just moves like at such a cracking pace. Everybody's so likable. It's reasonably well written. It's fun enough that you kind of like, I'm not going to sit here and think about why Vivica Fox is doing what she's doing. I'm not going to think about how the hand does what it does, how does this, what devil is this? How does it transport from the guy in California to Devon Sawa in this town? Like, you don't think about all that kind of stuff because you're just going along for the ride while it's there, which is exactly what a film like this should do. So very competently directed.
I want to do a cool shout out to Christopher Hart, who played the Hand. And he is possibly one of the most famous hand actors because he played Thing in the Addams Family movies. And
the 90s ones?
The 90s ones, yes, with Raul Julia and Angelica Houston. And I'm really genuinely impressed with how Devon Sawa managed to get the fighting his own hand thing pretty good while the hand is attached. And it, like I said before, there is that element of Bruce Campbell beating himself up from Evil Dead in there, which I appreciate. And then at some point later on, he decides, I can't keep doing this anymore, and he just decides to cut his own hand off. Which, to a certain point, there's a logic to it. It's a stoner logic, but at the same time, that also causes their problems to increase. And they manage to just actually have this personality in the hand, and it's largely because of Christopher Hart's way that he was able to just really use his hand to crawl, and the shit that he does, like using a pencil sharpener to sharpen the fingernails to points and things, and little tiny bits like there's
and it should be noted, it looks really good. Like I noted that actually in the cast as well, and I just forgotten about that. But throughout the whole film, I was sort of going, the prosthetics in this, like the puppetry, is very good.
The head as well look great.
Well, that's good, but I thought the hand was a puppet while I was watching it. Surely it meant but okay, it's an actual actor, but you can't tell. So for the late 90s, they assume they've computer CGI'd him
Yeah,
out,
CGI and green screening. Yeah.
green screened him out, but it's really fucking good green screening out. Like you
Mm,
can't tell. It doesn't
mm,
look fake at all. I can't imagine this film had a massive budget. So,
yeah.
you can see some pretty dodgy stuff. Like now, you can look back and go, "Oh, well, that looks pretty." $25 million budget in the late '90s. It's not massive.
Yeah.
So props to whoever did their special effects. They were really
Yeah.
good. And you sort of notice you're going to go on, but the actual makeup and effects of a lot of the
Mm,
characters looks fantastic. I mean, it's almost iconic for this film is the bottle stuck in Seth Green's head.
yeah. And the fact that there's just little attention to detail. Like when he moves his head, you can hear liquid sloshing about in there still because there's a brain and it didn't, the whole thing just sucked onto his head,
And Eldon Hansen eating a burrito or a taco or something, and just seeing that, like, is it blood or sauce? I can't tell, oozing out of his neck. It was super gross, but you're like, that's kind of funny. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's what. The more I talk about it, the more I go, yeah. My initial reaction is like, meh. The more I talk about it, like, this film was actually decent for what it
Yeah.
was. If you rate it on what it was trying to achieve, it was decent enough. It ended at the big school dance at the end, which every American film needs to.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of Carrie in there,
Yeah. Yeah.
just for good measure.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a worthy entry
Yeah.
in the late '90s sort of teen comedy.
It's a refreshing change of pace because so many of them went, like we said at the beginning, there was a bit more of a slew of those teen horror movies that came out, and a lot of them became very derivative of Scream or some of the monster movies that came out. Like the first Jeepers Creepers movie was actually pretty good, but then they just dove off a cliff and became trash. Um, this one has this one was almost like a little bit Shaun of the Dead in a way, where it's a bit of a, the Shaun of the Dead posters and stuff said it's a romzom.com. And this kind of is a bit of a medley in that way. It's not as fine-tuned as Shaun of the Dead, but it's still got that same kind of spirit to it. It's like it knows exactly what it's trying to go for, and it's like, yeah, I'm just going to hit that, going to hit that, going to hit that. Don't need to explain lots. So we're going to keep the time down. Simple.
And just to look at some of the writers involved here. So this film's written by Terry Hughes Burton, and one other person here, Rod Milbauer. Terry Hughes Burton. I mean, these people have gone on to some interesting work in later years. Terry Hughes Burton here. Most recently, he's working as a producer on stuff like Star Trek Discovery, Don't Mention the War, but also a writer of a number of episodes. Shows like The 100, Quantum Break. Is that video game TV show crossover thing? I can't remember.
Quantum Break. Yes, yeah, that was a
it was one of the video game that had the accompanying TV show thing in the game or something. Didn't quite work, but it was an interesting idea. So interesting stuff there for her. And the other writer here has gone on to some interesting work. Rod Milbauer, amongst other things, has most recently worked on stuff like A Handmaid's Tale. As a producer. And as a writer, he also worked on Quantum Break and Eureka and Supernatural.
It looks like they've kept their writing team going because there's a lot of the same projects that they're working on.
You just sort of go look at this and go, this from Idle Hands to The Handmaid's Tale. There's a very, very long way.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't think there's much crossover. The Venn diagram of those two movies is an interesting one.
Rodman Flender, which the director has a fantastic name. Rodman Flender. Most recently directed On Becoming a God in Central Florida, the Kirsten Dunst TV show. It apparently was quite well rated. So he's still kicking around and doing bits and pieces here and there. He also worked on some episodes of The Office, which obviously was incredibly successful.
Yeah. Interesting.
But it was an interesting choice, and I appreciate you picking it because you could have gone when I go low, you go high.
I'm just lulling you into a full sense of security, and one day
yes.
you're gonna lay up a movie that's just like, oh yep, it's all Oscar winners, it's all fantastic stuff, and I'm just gonna find the crappiest connection to the worst movie, and we will end up watching Cats.
Well, that could be fun too. I could take his places this week. I could take the Spy Kids 4, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay, yeah. So where are you taking us? That's the
I
big
have
question.
gone. Look, this is not necessarily going to be a popular choice, but I am going to go with something I've never seen before, and I think will be a little bit relevant considering what's happening with this property today. So
Okay.
we are going to go to follow Jessica Alba, and in 2005, we're going to watch The Fantastic Four. This is not the Josh Trank Fantastic, or whatever it was, the one with
Fantastic.
the Rooney Mara or whatever it was in it.
Yeah.
The really disastrous one. I've seen that one. I've seen the Roger Corman one from the 90s that they made to keep the rights. I have never seen this one.
I
And
have. There are two.
There's two of them. And this one, it has a 5.7 audience rating, a 40 Metascore. And the reason it's a little topical is there was news this week on the latest incarnation of this from Marvel himself, the Spider-Man director. What's his name? John Watts stepped away from the director's chair of the Fantastic Four. The next, whatever the form of Fantastic Four will take for Marvel, I believe it's going to be a film.
Probably. That's probably what we're going to try to do.
That would be logical. I don't think it's a TV show or anything for Disney Plus. So this is, the first family of Marvel, and this was early 2000s superhero filmmaking. And look, I think it's probably not very good, but it could be interesting considering its heritage and seeing that, obviously Chris Evans, it was his first Marvel film, and he went on to become a very, very successful star in Marvel films, just not as Johnny Storm.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's an interesting choice of movie, and it is 100% of the time. It feels like an early 2000s movie in every sense. And I'm really interested to see what you think of it.
It should be noted, this is only 3 years before Iron Man.
Yeah.
3 years before the MCU started.
Yeah.
I wonder if the intention was for this to start the MCU.
Maybe. I mean, the Fantastic Four, like my mate Mike back in the UK, shout out to Mike Russell, love you, man. He explained to me one of the problems with this movie and the sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and it was the presentation of, as you said, Marvel's first family. The Fantastic Four, the icons, the crown jewel for many a year in the Marvel kingdom. It's that it should be an action adventure story in the lines of classic Lost in Space rather than an action superhero story. That's not what they are. They are largely, out of the four of them, there are two that are scientists. One who is a bit of a cocksure jock, and one who's a rock man. And they have never quite got that. He always said that it should be done in the vein of like Indiana Jones or something like that, where it's an adventure movie rather than an action movie.
It'll be interesting to see if they choose that direction with whatever they choose to go with next, because the last few times they've tried it, it really hasn't worked. Should be noted, by the way, in case anyone was wondering, I think maybe there was an inkling, a twinkle in the eye of MCU, because this was executive produced by Kevin Feige.
Oh, well, it came out just the other day that he's already mapped out the next 10 years of MCU movies loosely in his head, and that unnerves me, frankly, because Marvel movies are very quickly becoming things where they don't actually know how to end their movies, and they just are like, oh, tune in next month for the next fantastic episode of MCU. But I digress.
Anyway, next week we'll be talking about the 2005. This is the Jessica Alba version of the Fantastic Four. Just because I've never seen it, I think it might be interesting to look at the our early days of what could have been.
Yes.
Could we talk a little bit more about Marvel while we're in
Yeah,
the
let's
world of
talk
Marvel
a
and
little
talk
bit
about
more about Marvel. Should we talk about Moon Knight?
Let's.
Okay.
So those who tuned in last week, and if you didn't, why not? Go and stand in the corner, really. Because we had a bit of a break there. We talked a little about the first 3 episodes I think I'd watched of Moon Knight, and you said I was pretty unimpressed. And you'd said that episode 4 had turned it around for you.
Well, it started to.
So I thought I will give it the benefit of the doubt because a few people did the same thing. And so lots of stuff out there, how awesome episode 4 was. And I thought, well, let's take a look. So I took a look. And I'll pay it. It does go in an interesting direction here. So I guess if you're not up to episode 4, skip ahead a few minutes, I suppose, or mute us or whatever you want to do. Because it might be a bit tricky to kind of discuss it without going into too spoilery. Spoiler warnings up. You've been warned. The fact that I was actually enjoying the episode better than the first 3, and I was really getting a very strong Indiana Jones vibe all the way through it. I was getting a massive Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I was wondering all the way through, going, are they doing this deliberately? They must be doing this deliberately. Like, they must be giving me super, Indiana Jones. You can't do Indiana Jones vibes by accident. No. Did I say, sorry, not Raiders, probably more Last Crusade, obviously, the tests in the temple, the penitent man will pass. And God, that film was good. I really hope they don't ever make a 4th one of those,
No, they don't need to. It's a perfect trilogy.
Perfect trilogy. If you did a 4th film, it would just ruin it. It would just
it's too
why
old.
would they? Yeah. But and then as we're halfway, we're probably 12 months away from another one of these. By the way,
No, please, no.
He's already dead. The funny thing was that Harrison Ford looked way too old in 2008. And that was 14 years ago. And Jesus Christ, how are they going to make this work? I don't know. Sorry, off topic. But halfway through, 2/3 of the episode where was it Mark? I guess at that point in time, Oscar Isaac gets shot by Ethan Hawke, and then he wakes up in the mental hospital. And he's watching he wakes up via the sort of mental image of him appearing in what is quite obviously a parody of Indiana Jones, which is the VCR tape he's watching in the mental hospital. And you're like,
in Solomon's mind kind of thing. Yep.
Yeah, but it was very obviously, that was Raiders of the Lost Ark right there.
It was Indiana Jones and Short Round.
Yeah, which is the wrong sidekick for that film, but okay, I'll pay it. But it was just there to evoke a feeling, and it did that effectively. And he wakes up in a mental hospital, and Ethan Hawke's the doctor, and you're like, okay, I will pay it. I will pay it. This is a very different direction for a superhero show to take, and it's different from probably anything you've done, except maybe, WandaVision took some pretty left field choices, at least in the first half of the series before it wimped out.
Yep.
But I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but I'm not really sure I care enough at this point in time. And I'm not really sure. Yes, it's interesting, and yes, I'm mildly curious to see what the fuck's happening. But I'm still a bit like, do you want to watch episode 5? And I'm like, no, Disney, I'd rather not, actually. A little bit like I just don't care about his characters. I don't care about Mark and Steven. I don't care about Lola. Is that her name? The woman they're going around, Lolly. I can't think of her name. Anyway, that's how interested I am in the story.
Layla.
The only character I've said last week, the only character who's moderately interesting in this is Ethan Hawke. More Ethan Hawke. He needs his own. That's a man who needs his own spin-off series. Really. He's great in this. He's a desperately underrated actor these days, unfortunately. But I just can't really find a motivation to go back and watch more, even if it's mildly interesting now, because I just don't care. And the Khonshu character is, I mean, he wasn't in this episode, good. He just seems kind of ridiculous. And I think we talked a little about it last week. We've moved from the world of moderately grounded, the more grounded Marvel heroes into some pretty wackadoodle,
cosmic.
Cosmic's a good word, but ones that seem a little bit more far out, right? And I mean, I'll pay this to Kevin Feige. If he did this, I assume, he's a very successful man. I assume he's done this deliberately, in the sense that they picked their more grounded characters first, and now they've gone, well, we've got the runs on the board. Everybody loves us. The Marvel brand is untouchable. Now we can start to take some risks and really, to lean into some of the more, out there characters that exist in their catalog.
The problem with that stems into a lot of issues that I have with Doctor Strange, which I won't go into. I'm not going to spoil it or anything like that. But it's something that I've seen with the Eternals, with Moon Knight, with Doctor Strange, with WandaVision, and even Loki, where they're taking more risks per se in kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to introduce Egyptian gods are actually a thing that is in this cosmos. And Thor, you've got in Thor 4, we're going to have Zeus and the Greek gods and things like that. And there's the Celestials and the the primal gods, whatever Ego was, and things like that. So like, okay, this is that's a lot. And the problem is they're not actually doing anything really interesting with them. It's like, here is an interesting concept, like the idea in Moon Knight of avatars for the gods doing their will on Earth. It's like, cool, that puts a barrier between gods interfering and not. But there isn't actually any reason why they do that. Like, Khonshu gets imprisoned because he uses his powers directly, and because he doesn't just let the avatar do it. It's like, okay, so what's the point of gods even existing if they're not going to do anything? If they were to use something like in Dungeons and Dragons as an example, where there's, particularly in the Critical Role universe, where they have a divine gate, where it is incredibly rare for a god to be able to directly influence what happens on the plane of existence that the players and the characters all inhabit. It's all through prayer and deals and bargains. It's through these avatars that they can have power. The divine gate stops the god's power from coming in, which would explain why they have avatars, but there doesn't seem to be any actual reason why they have avatars, and they don't explain it. And fair point, they don't necessarily need to. But going into spoilers for the end of Moon Knight a little bit, you have gods literally fighting over Cairo. And it's like, okay, I don't care. And it's...
Is there a sky beam?
There's lots of laser beams.
Okay.
Yeah. It's non-surprising for a Marvel TV show. And
it's a bold choice.
Particularly for this movie, this TV series, it's a limited series. They're saying, yep, there's not going to be another series or anything like that. They have a little Easter egg of the character of Moon Knight continuing on and all of that stuff. But the end, I don't bloody care. I've lost all interest and investment in these characters that you have given me. No one is in a position where I'm interested in what happens next. And the gods fighting over Egypt, supposedly being big symbology about choice versus predestined evil and things like that. It's like, Yeah, you're not presenting that well. It is an interesting concept. I'm not going to deny them that, but it's just not well presented, and that problem comes in everything. Like you talk about the finale of Loki, where Kang is there just monologuing for a long time about the vitality and the importance of the sacred timeline and all of that stuff. It's like, yeah, that's all really interesting, but you've got a guy talking to me for 25 fucking minutes. No one is charismatic enough to talk for 25 minutes and keep me engaged every minute. The way that they're actually telling these stories and rounding them off in a successful way is not good. They are so painfully getting to a point where their products aren't finishing at the end of the TV show or the end of the movie. It is, as I joked before, tune in for the next exciting episode of the MCU. And
which might be by design. You
but
keep
it's
tuning in.
bad. You can do. They were able to do it in the first movies where they had just little seeds that they didn't go back to for ages, and they were able to feed the bigger story. And here, they're being very brazen about it and forgetting to actually tell a cohesive, complete, start to finish story about their hero. They're forgetting that the hero is the hero's journey that we want to follow as audiences, but everyone is getting more interested in the villains. And in classic Marvel way, the good villains end up dying, the bad villains end up just
So they're all bad villains, aren't they? Usually.
well, I mean, like Killmonger was a cool, interesting character, and it's like, oh yeah, we'll kill him. Loki, cool character, we'll turn him into an anti-hero. They don't know what to do with their villains, and they don't know what to do with their heroes. They're
I'll
not
play this.
actually unfinished stories.
I feel like DC are almost dealing with this problem a little better right now than Marvel, in the sense, if you look at Peacemaker, I have over here the DC encyclopedia, and every week he'd be like, matter eating lad, oh, he eats all matter, and every week he'd be talking about this ridiculous character that exists in the DC canon. And you look him up and go, oh my god, there really is a matter eating lad. That's canon. And you're like, and it's just like, James Gunn going, yeah, the comic books, they're fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
And DC is sort of going, we're having a laugh with it, right? We're not taking ourselves too seriously. Whereas that might have been kind of their problem initially. I mean, that was maybe the problem with, Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. It was completely humorless. And now it's maybe we're seeing Marvel sort of going too far in that direction to become too big and too successful that they've almost forgotten, where they got started, in the sense that they had a very deliberate, I mean, they just sort of, the quippiness almost needs to be, well, I'm sorry, I need you to dial up the quippiness on this script by 5%. It doesn't seem organic necessarily the way it did at the start, but I don't know that that's necessarily my problem with this, other than, well, I don't care about these characters the way I should, to actually, want to tune in week after week. And like, you hear about it, like, I don't care about the next Disney Plus series. They've kind of done it to death a little bit, really. I mean, we've got Miss Marvel, I think, is the next one.
Yeah, there's Miss Marvel. They've confirmed that there's a Loki season 2, but Moon Knight, they said, is a limited series. Falcon and Winter Soldier is a limited series. I don't think they're going back for WandaVision season 2.
We get to be She-Hulk at some point.
Oh yeah, there's She-Hulk. Hawkeye was a limited series. So I don't know what else is coming, but honestly, I don't really care, because overall, just looking at the full seasons, none of them have been able to do one cohesive series that it was either started great and just declined, or was very middling throughout. And it's like, okay, do better or don't do it.
Look, with a bit of a quick shout out to Siren Divine for her exceptional hair dyeing skills. And I believe there were some choice musical cuts played to provide inspiration while the hair creation process was really undergoing. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're not watching the live stream this week, over the last couple of weeks, you've really missed out, because George was kind of doing his very best Justin Timberlake last week.
You can go back and watch us on twitch.tv/The Fright Brain or youtube.com/Armchair
if you just listen to the audio version of this, I'm sorry, you were missing out on some epic green hair this week that my co-host is wearing. I mean, you get a gig with the drummer with his Blink-182 with that hair. Seriously, it's good stuff. The 90s called. And anyway, props to you, Siren Divine. It's almost, not quite, but almost worthy of forgiving you for that Thomas the Tank Engine atrocity from a couple of weeks ago. That's I'm going to be having nightmares about that for a very long time to come.
Yeah, I was talking to her the other day, and she just started singing the theme song, and it's an earworm. It gets in there and just riddles around, and just you can't help but it's there. Then
I was talking about Bloomhouse with friend of the show Patria this week, because she apparently she didn't know who they were, and said she didn't think they'd done until I showed her. So you've never seen Get Out? Oh, I don't know what that is. And then I showed it to her, and she's like, "Oh, of course I saw that." So I had to explain what Bloomhouse did, and then it got me thinking. I still think that Thomas the Tank Engine Bloomhouse production, that would be worth going to the cinema to see. We've gone a little away from Marvel here, but yes, while we're talking Disney Plus, have you seen? It was May the 4th, as we said earlier. Did you see the Obi-Wan Kenobi trailer that dropped yesterday?
I did. They are working really hard to make people want to care about Space Jesus.
They really are. What do you mean? I take it then you were underwhelmed.
Well, no, it looks interesting, but their trailers for their TV shows have actually been relatively good. I will watch it because I have Disney Plus, but I don't really care.
No, I think that's a fair criticism there. I am a little bit the same, and I don't think you liked Boba Fett. Yes.
I liked what they were trying to do. I liked the fact that there was very clearly a kind of that, for lack of a better descriptor, the Latinx kind of vibe to it, thanks to Robert Rodriguez being the showrunner essentially. But the fact that they just forgot to actually tell an interesting story about Boba Fett, kind of a problem.
Yeah, they did kind of abandon him halfway through the series and go, "Don't pay attention here, Mandalorian. Forget about that guy."
For the finale of his show, it's like, yeah, fuck off for 20 minutes.
But I enjoyed it nonetheless. It was weird. But I'm a little bit like there's lots of explosions. Cool, I guess. I mean, that's not really what I'm looking forward to here. I mean, I'd be interested in Disney, be it in their Marvel or Star Wars IPs, trying something a little bit different. Maybe tell me a spy story, maybe a heist show, a crime show, a procedural detective story in a superhero or Star Wars universe. I don't need just superhero shows and science fiction action shows. Like, you can tell other kinds of stories. I mean, you've got all the money, right?
I mean, prime example, honestly, is Only Murders in the Building.
And that was good.
It was a really good show, and it was totally different to anything else. It was counter.
What I'm saying here is that is an original IP, which apparently is coming back for another season. But what I'm saying is you've got. I mean, I was wrong. I think a few years ago, when Disney came out with their streaming service, we were like, why do we need another one? And, what exactly is Disney going to do to get people on board? Have they got like movies we've already seen, old Disney movies and old Marvel Star Wars movies? What are they going to do? But I was wrong, and obviously, fortunately, so the Disney people, I imagine, are fairly well paid. They realized that this battle is going to be fought on the battleground of IP. That is where it was the news the other week that Netflix are losing all their subscribers, or a lot of subscribers, and their share price dropped, and everyone was like, "Is this the death of Netflix?" They don't have that. They don't have that, and they haven't been good at doing that. I mean, so Disney have fucking nailed it because they've got Marvel, got Star Wars. Now that is the base on which they build everything else that they do. There is on the the shoulders of those two IP, and for now at least, they can just keep pumping out Marvel and Star Wars shows, and people
Exactly.
will watch them, and people will get it for their fucking kids, so they can go back and watch Guardians of the Galaxy 6 times a day.
Yeah.
And
Disney were able to pick up Marvel for a bargain price, and it has paid for itself 1,000 times over, and it is the reason why we are in the position that we are. It's impressive, and yeah, totally. The golden goose keeps laying eggs.
And we look at Amazon is now in the James Bond game. They have a Lord of the Rings rights, and that's if you're a rights holder, people are going to throw money at you, right? To have to have the right to make shows. That they had the Wheel of Time, which imagine 25 years ago someone was going to try and buy up the rights to Wheel of Time and make a TV show, and fuck off they were. And Netflix, they can't play on that field. I don't think they don't have the rights to anything. They've got to come up with their own shit, and they're not very good at that.
The closest they've got is The Witcher,
and maybe Bridgerton. People like Bridgerton quite a bit.
The Witcher, Bridgerton, original IP of Stranger Things, but the other original IP that they've tried that has been big budget, like Altered Carbon, that was a failure. They've persistently tried to kind of resurrect shows that were abandoned at other things like Lucifer and what were a couple of the other ones? I can't remember now off the top of my head, but they're kind of buzzards, just picking at whatever they can, which is really bizarre considering they were the first big one to really make it big. You'd think, okay, first in, best dressed, but apparently not. They missed a lot of opportunity.
But they saw it coming. I'll go pay it to them. I mean, we're hardly analysts in this space, but if you go back 5 or 6 years and they started coming out, maybe a bit longer now, they came out when they first came out with like Orange is the New Black, I think was one of their very first big, with their own productions. And remember how weird it was that Netflix are making their own stuff? I mean, the only place like House of Cards, another one, and how they were so successful with their first shows, their first few shows. When they really, I guess, now they've got into it, they've kind of gone backwards. They don't seem to come up with those hits anywhere near as often. But I guess the other thing is that back then they were kind of the only game in town. Now, if you're a writer with any kind of talent and an idea, the competition for people who've got ideas is massive now because there are in the States you've got Prime, Disney, Netflix, Apple, Hulu, HBO. Paramount, HBO. That's 7 I can think of off the top of my head, and there's a couple other smaller ones. You've got I saw the trailer. Roku are making original material now, so we saw the trailer the other day for the Weird Al movie is going straight to Roku streaming. Tubi and Crackle and stuff occasionally make their own shit. Awful, probably, but they,
and then you've got Shudder as well,
and you've got broadcast television. The cable networks still exist in some way, shape, or form. So, his talent is so diluted now. I imagine that's probably a reason for it. They're not going to be landing on Netflix because, well, they've got so many other places to go. And but they saw it coming. They seemed to get that they just couldn't get by showing old movies anymore. But they needed to make their own movies and their own TV shows and their own IP. But they made the original Marvel TV series and it didn't really go so well for them. But people seem to hold this some sort of elevated light now. I don't understand why. But they could see it coming, but they just didn't quite nail it. Like you kind of wonder, how did they not want to go out and buy Star Trek? Because you can see Paramount now are really, Star Trek is almost their battering ram for Paramount Plus. We've got Star Trek.
Yeah. And the only other one that they're really pushing is Indiana Jones. It's like, oh yes, remember nostalgia?
They've got the Yellow Jackets was on Paramount in Australia at least, so I don't know where it landed up, but that was really good telly. But
The closest that Netflix have come is they've got this deal with Mark Miller for his Millerworld stuff, and that came out with Jupiter Ascending, which tanked, and it's been, instead of having a season 2, they're completely retooling it and changing it entirely to a totally new series. It's like, okay, sure, don't care.
It'll be interesting to see. I saw someone say to me the other day that they felt like Netflix might lose this war in the long run because everyone else has something they can lean on.
Yeah.
Disney make movies, they have theme parks, they have cruise lines, they're fucking Disney.
Mhm.
Amazon have fucking Amazon, right? So they can lose money forever on their TV channel because they're just making all the monies in their, their Amazon business, and plus everything else that they got their fingers in. Apple make I don't know if you heard of Apple. They make a moderately successful branded telephone.
I don't know.
Apple. You know, so in that war, those, I mean, obviously you got HBO and Paramount there who are maybe somewhat in a similar boat, but HBO don't seem to have had that dip in quality that the others have had.
Well, HBO are owned, I believe, by Warner Brothers Discovery now.
I think they just got sold. They just, because John Oliver takes the piss out of them all the time, but
yeah,
I think they just got sold to somebody else. But you're right, they were owned by Warner.
yeah, and I think they're now. I think Warner Brothers and all of Warner affiliates are now owned by Discovery.
That's right. Yeah,
as Warner Discovery, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Netflix was to die, considering the Netflix worldwide, not just in the US, is usually the first place that you're going to be able to get that usually get the sort of like the Harry Potter movies and any of the DC movies, any of the properties that are Warner Brothers movies. I wouldn't be surprised if Netflix had financial problems, Warner's go, okay, we'll buy you and we'll fold you into HBO, and it'll be HBO Netflix or something like that.
The brand seems like it's worth something, doesn't it? It doesn't feel like it. I mean, they're interesting. They could be the next blockbuster.
Yeah.
Remember how big Blockbuster were once upon a time? They seemed insurmountably huge.
Yeah.
And then, now they're dead. But surprising that nobody ever bought the brand for something useful. But I'd be surprised if no one saw value in Netflix and their catalog of stuff if they ever fell over. But I kind of feel like maybe go back and watch listen to our shows from 3 or 4 years ago when we said Disney Plus. That doesn't sound good now. But we'll find out, I guess, in the long run whether we're right. But I kind of feel like, I don't know. How do you have Netflix?
I do have Netflix. Yes.
I feel like it's like the least common thing I watch now. Like of all the streaming services, can't think of the last thing that landed on Netflix. I thought, no, I need to watch that.
You know what? The problem that Netflix has is it doesn't have, in spite of it being the birth of binge TV, it hasn't ever been able to actually break into like timetable TV. Like Disney have their Marvel and their Star Wars episodes that every Wednesday the new episode of Moon Knight drops and things like that. And so it's a reason to open that app every week because you're getting something new. With Netflix, if like Stranger Things, when season 4 comes out, if it's binge, I'm gonna binge the shit out of it because I'm gonna want to watch it. I love that show. But if they did it one at a time, there's instantly reason to open the app. And if they had a couple of brands that they were able to kind of go, okay, so Mondays, I'm going to be watching the new episode of Stranger Things and talk about that until the next episode comes out the next week. Fridays, I go in and I watch the new episode of whatever it is that they're doing, Voltron Defenders of the Universe or whatever it is. It gives reason to go back, but it's the culture of Netflix is get in, smash the shit out of it in 8 hours, and then get out until next year or a year and a half when the next season launches. There's not too much impetus, and there's not enough new content coming out to it that is mass audience appeal. Like there's tons of content out there, especially a lot of Korean stuff coming in, lots of Korean shows, but they very fluctuate in quality. Some of them are very generic and derivative of much better stuff. Then you do also get these really cool ones their animation department has been shut down now because they lost so many subscribers, which is ridiculous considering the overall quality of their original animated shows that they've
And you
had
look
in
at
the
something
last
like
years.
but what was the Amazon superhero show? It was animated. Invincible.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
for example. It
now success that was a mini phenomenon there for a little while, and it was I imagine, very successful. You hear a lot of people talk about it. Everybody's been talking about it. It's amazing. It's the best thing ever. We've got the best animation.
going to be huge.
Huge. But then it goes to show that animation can know how fucking huge Rick and Morty is. I'm not saying that they were going to make anything of that level of quality.
No.
Dan Harmon doesn't work very often, apparently, but it goes to show you can do a lot with animation. It's a very popular storytelling device for adults and children. And you see how, I said it before, how Amazon sort of become the home ground now for fantasy. Wheel of Time, whatever that Critical Role show was. The
coming
Lord of the
out.
Rings stuff's coming out, and they've had a bunch of other little ones in there I think we've talked about in the past. So they're almost establishing not necessarily their brand, but if you like fantasy, you've probably maybe think Amazon, because that's where you get your stuff.
Yeah.
And that's actually been kind of potentially useful, really little marketing tool for them. Whereas it's kind of surprising that Netflix hasn't decided to go where you see good anime, all the best anime. Maybe people love that shit. I can't stand it, but like, you want good anime, you watch it here. I know they have the occasional thing,
they've
but
beaten to the punch with anime because Crunchyroll is basically the only app that now pretty much exists. There was Anime Lab, there was Funimation, there was Crunchyroll, there were a couple of other ones, but they slowly but surely bought each other out. And now everything is under Crunchyroll. And it's like, okay, yeah, you like anime? Cool. Just get that, and you literally get everything that you could ever want. Whereas Netflix, they would, at the moment, they've got like the first 2 seasons of One Piece, and that's a show that's got well over 1,000 episodes, and it's still not finished yet. And yet they were only able to get 2 seasons. They randomly get bits and pieces. It's a mess.
And Crunchyroll is now owned by Sony.
Yeah. So now, just off the top of your head, what genre do you think of when you think of Netflix?
I think of lousy documentaries, personally. It's kind of, the brand for me is shitty documentaries that people watch and like because of their confirmation bias. But they do a lot of that, though. Like, they'll be like, funny enough, I was walking home I was going to my personal trainer tonight, and I was walking home down St. Kilda Road. I was waiting at the stoplight, the traffic lights to cross, and a girl on a bicycle rode up next to me. And the first thing I noticed was a yellow sign hanging off a basket on the back of her bike that said, "Netflix, watch Cowspiracy," which is a piece of vegan propaganda parading as a documentary. And they have a lot of those. But more amusingly, just to put the tail on that story, on inside the back of her bicycle, next to him, was crammed. Her basket on the back of her bicycle was crammed full of United Australia Party signs that she'd obviously ripped off posts and was taking away to dispose of. And I'm like, on the one hand, if you don't know, we have an election here. So she basically torn down people's election signs and had crammed them into the back of her bike. And trust me, if you're a vegan who wants people to watch Cowspiracy so much that you're advertising it on your bicycle around Melbourne, you ain't voting for the United Australia Party, let me tell you right now. So I don't think she was taking them home to put on her wall or put in her front yard so people know about their local UAP member. So I was like, okay, Cowspiracy's a bit shit, and most Netflix documentaries are, but you're doing God's work, really. So kudos to you. But that's I don't think they have a brand.
No, they don't. They never really have. Which
kind of everything to everyone.
That kind of was their brand, because they had the serious stuff of House of Cards and the slightly more comical adult thing of Orange is the New Black, and then they had the big success of Stranger Things, which is really their only show that is still going that has got any hype behind it. It's like, okay, you did the Marvel shows for a while. Daredevil season 1 was great. Jessica Jones season 1 was great. Daredevil 2 was not great. Jessica Jones was not great. Luke Cage, not great. Iron Fist, not great. Defender's terrible. Oops.
Yeah, and they're actually the most expensive now.
Yeah.
They keep popping their price up. We've stuck the boots in them for a little while, so I should probably segue out of the Netflix chat. But I think it's interesting. I find it interesting, isn't it? Like how they were, the first, the biggest, for a long time the best, and how they look like they're slipping. And it's interesting how often that happens. You get to the top, you get comfortable, and then people come for you.
In the wise words of King Louis, you reach the top and you have to stop, and that's what's bothering me. Oh, Ooby-Doo, I want to be like you.
I think there's something in that for all of us, don't you? Have we got time for our sponsor this week?
I think we do, yeah. Yeah, let's go to our sponsor. Who is our sponsor this week?
I'm just going to make sure that they're actually ready.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I think we're fine. We're now going to be crossing to German Variety TV for a special conversation with Mark Hamill in a gold jumpsuit.
Ärger, rechts mit Papi. Lucky will Strohmann werden und das stört den Alten. Verständlich. Naja, Sie sehen ja, wie die zwei sich unterhalten. Gegen Partys schlagendes Argument, ja nichts machen. Du wirst tief fallen, mein Sohn. Wohin? Sie werden lachen. In den Schoß einer Prinzessin, Donnerwetter. Also die neueste von Prinz Charles ist auch nicht netter. Doch das lockt Neider aus allen Ecken. Man muss sich verstecken. Eine Höhle lädt ein. Doch jene Höhle ist gar keine, sondern das offene von einem Filmkritiker. Sonst wetzt dieses Monster nur die Zähne, aber hier zeigt er sich viel gütiger. Denn er sieht gerade den Film, das impertinente Imperium schlägt zu. Und wie bei Romeo und Julia endet es cool, ja, nicht immer wird Liebe belohnt. Luckys Co-Pilot bös und seinen Chef ohne Braut auf den Mond, weil er selbst steht scharf auf eine Prinzessin. Manche sind eben tierisch auf Adel begierig, man kennt das ja. Nun hängt er da, nicht wahr, und zählt zu den Blamierten. Doch es endet happy, wie in einer Frauenillusion. Er fühlt sich sehr versetzt und ungeharnischt und sagt: Unter der König läuft nunmehr bei mir gar nicht. Wir liefern prompt noch dazu eine Aparte. Hier meine Karte. Und das geht? Das zweite galaktische Fernsehen weiß, was sie gern sehen, mit Empfehlung vom Chef. Happy End mit Miss Berlin. Was sagen Sie da?
Auf Schönheitsköniginnen steht auch Papa. Oder bläst er knapp die Sache ab?
Na dann, fröhliche Weihnacht auch im All. Fröhliche Weihnacht überall. Das Imperium.
Well, there you go. That was a treat for everyone.
That was a thing. That happened.
It's interesting to hear Mark Hamill's take on it.
I think so. I think it's though, and he actually
from a variety sketch show I initially didn't want to do, but I thought it doesn't matter. No one outside Germany will see it.
Oh, then the internet happened.
Yeah, well, who could have seen that in 1980? His German was pretty good there for someone who doesn't speak German. That's a little treat you can find on YouTube if you want to watch it. Don't know why you would, but it's there.
Should we
talk
about the one that we
move on a
missed
little bit?
last week?
Yes. We were going to get to it. We just ran a little bit too long last week, which never happens. Speaking of Disney Plus, this is a show that is now streaming on Disney Plus because they've bought Fox. And that is Death on the Nile. Have you seen it?
I have. This is the sequel to Kenneth Branagh's directed Murder on the Orient Express.
Yet again, we're going back to the oeuvre of Agatha Christie. Have you ever read the books?
Long time ago. Yeah. Not all of them, but a couple of them. Like I actually can't remember which ones I've read, but I grew up.
There are a lot of them, I think.
Yeah, and I grew up on. My mum was a huge fan of the David Suchet BBC TV version, or it might have been ITV version of Agatha Christie's Poirot TV series. So
this is the modern updated version of that one. That's kind of when I think of Agatha Christie, I think of those very austere British ones that used to be on the ABC here on that old people watched.
Probably
that one. No, that was a TV show, I reckon. Probably one you're talking about. It was in the 90s.
Yeah. It had the sort of like very look, yeah.
I've never read the books. I've never been a big fan of Agatha Christie. Well, I haven't read the books, so maybe they're great. I don't know. But this is, as you said, the sequel to Murder on the Orient Express. While on vacation on the Nile, Hercule Poirot must investigate the murder of a young heiress. This has an incredible cast. Annette Bening, Kenneth Branagh is back again as Hercule Poirot. He's also directing. Russell Brand. Who else we got in here? We've, of course, got Wonder Woman herself, whose name escaped. Gal Gadot, sorry. It's a huge cast. And they all look like they're having a pretty good time. So is Jennifer Saunders in here? Was that who I... as well. Sophie Okanoda, Letitia Wright, of course, of Black Panther fame. Armie Hammer, before he made this, before all that stuff came out, all the cannibal stuff, Armie.
It was, it's all just hyperbole. He's just gone into hiding for no reason. He's innocent.
Saunders and French in here was a nice touch. But I was like, Armie Hammer, I haven't seen you in anything for years. And I don't think I will be seeing him in anything for years. I think he's decided to shut down his career. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google it.
The other one that
is it frustrating though?
No, I go.
You come across somebody with real talent, and they just like, oh, you're a piece of shit. I can't anymore. This week I learned that Tommy, lead singer of Queens of the Stage, who you and I reviewed their last record a couple of years ago, is a piece of shit woman beater who threatened to kill his girlfriend, his ex-wife's new boyfriend. I'm like, I really like that band. I really liked them. And like, now I can't listen to your music anymore because you're a piece of shit. Guys, piece of shit. Please. It's hard. I've gone 44 years and I think I've been mostly successful. So,
he just pulls out the knives.
Pro tip. I'm sorry. Armie Hammer. I'm like, man, he was on his way to somebody. He was going to play Superman. And
the George Miller
in the George Miller. So, but then he had to go and become a cannibal. Okay, well, whatever, dude. But anyway, it was interesting to see when you
call out was Emma Mackey, who plays Jacqueline de Belfort, the obsessed, jaded ex-lover of Conan Doyle. Yeah,
she's probably the one I've never heard of in this before.
Yeah, you won't because you didn't watch Sex Education on Netflix. Going back to our previous conversation. I loved that show, and a lot of people, when they watched that, just like, oh my God, is that Margot Robbie? And yes, there is a similarity to a certain degree in the look, but I loved her in that show, and I thought she did great in this, especially considering she's not exactly had much acting career, just because she's still very young. And she is thrown into one hell of an ensemble cast, and she keeps pace.
Just as I did watch a few episodes of Sex Education, and I'm honest, it was okay. It was okay. But just as usual, sort of very blancmange of shit that Netflix put out without any real identity. But Gillian Anderson's really fucking good, and Gillian Anderson, living treasure. But Emma Mackey,
Yep.
he was a real standout in this for me, in the sense of all these massive stars, and she was she was far and away the most impressive performance in the film.
100%.
This is a film that I should note, but like this is not good. I didn't see Murder on the Orient Express, so I can't comment on whether that was any good or not. This is weak.
The Murder on the Orient Express was good, and it had its own casting controversy, what with Johnny Depp, and that was right at the very beginning of the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard debacle, which we are now getting to the true meat and potatoes of elsewhere in the world of law and Hollywood news. So it seems to be a curse of these movies, but 100%, this is a much harder to enjoy movie. Not only is it long, but it's also, we've talked about it as a positive for Gal Gadot and her performance as Wonder Woman, of knowing her limitations and sticking her to that and just not asking much beyond that. In this, they do ask more of her, and she doesn't hit the mark often. She is supposed to be this beautiful kind of siren goddess, kind of just effortlessly beautiful, intelligent, charismatic kind of person, and she is, but at the same time she isn't, and it feels lacking. But the pace of the movie, trying to expand the mythos and the humanity of Hercule Poirot, does not serve this movie well.
You're right. She's a very limited actress. She went, and that's why she kind of worked in Wonder Woman. It's like Schwarzenegger in the early 80s. You know, those Terminator films, he wasn't much of an actor back then. He's got better over the years. But when he was doing Terminator, he was very limited. But the genius of James Cameron was to put him in a role where he didn't have to do much. He was being romantic. And hence, you know, Gal Gadot, who being an exceptionally limited actress, and that's being generous. Woman, that naivete and sort of limitation kind of really worked for the character.
Yeah.
And this is some sort of glamorous, you know, heiress.
Socialite
isn't very convincing. And, you know, she's supposed to be charismatic and beautiful and alluring, and she's good looking, but that's the limitation of it. She's not charismatic.
No.
She's not alluring. She's not convincing.
No.
And basically the gist of it is she steals Emma Mackey's man for off her. Basically, they meet him she meets him and basically woos him away from her friend, Jacqueline de Beaufort, and hence setting off the central drama of a film. And Simone wants revenge, but she's just so bland, so bland as a human being that you're like, I don't. Apart from being really got not much going for her.
And part of the other issue of it is essentially a cruise of hedonism, and that's not exactly an endearing thing. It's like, okay, you want us to empathize with the woe of Lynette Ridgway, Gal Gadot's character, and how she's being victimized by Jacqueline because she fell in love with her fiance and things like that. And it's like, okay, but sorry, first thing that comes to mind is dick move. Second thing, you're going around flashing fuck tons of cash. You have paid for the world's greatest detective to just hang around because you don't trust any of your friends. You're a fucking idiot if you are doing this. There's everything that she does just is in counter position to everything she says and what we are being told that she is. She's supposed to be this really intelligent businesswoman who controls everything. Even on a cruise, she's signing papers and doing all of this stuff. And like, okay, but you're being an idiot because you don't trust any of these people, and yet you literally invited them onto a boat with you where you can't escape. It's
she doesn't come across as an intelligent businesswoman. It's a little bit like that film in the Nicole Kidman played a brain surgeon. You're like, get over it. Nah, sorry, not buying that one.
To be fair, we did believe that Pamela Anderson could save lives as well.
Speak for yourself. I don't think anybody. I mean, we wanted to believe, we really did, but one of the main problems, aside from the acting in there, you're right. She's the fact that she's such a key figure in this, and she's not very good at it. She's horribly miscast. Basically, the film looks awful. It looks terrible. Like, there are numerous technical issues in this film. Now, I'm going to put one of them down to Disney, maybe, but the rest of it is down to the filmmaker. The first one is the film's prologue. In
the
is set in the First World War in black and white, where we learn about how Poirot got a scar on his face that nobody cares about. Yay, that was worth spending 10 minutes on. Now, I'm going to say this is a Disney problem, I think. I watch films with the subtitles on because I'm going deaf and I'm old. So I usually had the subtitles on. The subtitles during that first 10 minutes just had speaks French, speak French, yells in French. That was all it had. And I'm like, fucking great. I mean, like, that might be great if there's like nothing important being said, but there's stuff being said I think I need to know about. Like, so I don't know what the hell's going on. So what I had to do is I had to not only put on the usual closed caption subtitles, I had to put on the subtitles with the audio description, the description of what's happening. And so that would actually tell me what the people were saying in French, because the regular closed captions didn't. So going to say that's not a problem necessarily with Kenneth Branagh's film. It's a Disney problem. I don't know if other people have had it. Maybe it was just me. Don't know. But the major problem is this film is set in Egypt. And down the Nile, funnily enough. And there are a number of very picturesque, incredibly spectacular. I haven't been to Egypt. That would be interesting. Locations that one can vistas, you want to have in the background, the pyramids, the famous statues and shit. The special effects is terrible. We're talking at the start of the show about idle hands and the hand, how they animated the hand and then got the guy out of it. This film is, from a major studio with major stars in it. And the special effects look like something that Uwe Boll was pumping out 25 years ago. Ooh. Seriously, the green screen work, this CGI backgrounds with some stuff I've seen, the worst I've seen in Hollywood that I can in memory.
I don't understand why that is, because yes, obviously they couldn't go to Egypt and the Nile because the Nile is not as clean and tidy as that anymore, especially when they were heading off from Cairo. And, certain COVID problem probably limited them. But, I always think of sort of like world sets, and Sleepy Hollow. That was just one giant factory where they just built an entire forest where they could just roam around and just do whatever they needed to, have all the things. Like, couldn't they have done something like that?
Difference there is it's a highly stylized film. They could get away with it not really looking like a real place because it's Tim fucking Burton and it doesn't need to.
True.
But I mean, this is 2022, right? Like, you can't I can't imagine that actually producing a realistic vista CGI background of a, you know, an imagined, you know, Egypt from 100 years ago is that expensive or difficult to do when you consider the capabilities of CGI.
I do.
Or if you go back, if you go back to what, 2000 Amelie, that's a very heavy CGI film, believe it or not, because they made. You haven't been to Paris, have you?
Yeah, I have.
But you know how dirty that fucking city is.
Yeah.
the Paris of Amelie is clean and beautiful, you know, and like that's not real Paris.
No,
But they just use CGI. No weirdos hanging around. What was there about weirdos hanging around? All the famous.
That's no way of talking about English people in France.
Clipboards. They weren't English. Trust me. I think they were trying to tell me they were Syrian refugees, and they had clipboards trying to get me to sign a petition or something like that. And like, you know, the fastest way to get rid of them is not to go, I don't want to, or I don't speak French, because they all spoke English. Was to one word I remembered. One of the very few words I remember in Russian is "niet," and they just go, "Just leave me the hell alone," because they didn't speak Russian. But none of those weirdos with clipboards in Amelie. So, you know, that was 20 years ago with a tiny budget. So, do you not be able to do something similar? Obviously, you did not want to take it location, sure, but I don't understand why the special effects were so bad. They were really woeful.
I have a theory and a potential reason for that, and it is very much being felt in the movies that we are getting now, and why movies such as Black Adam have been delayed because of COVID. There's now this huge rush for CGI products to be finished, and there's not enough CGI houses to do it. They are backlogged. And this was done at the start of it when everything was just shutting down. And the idea of remote working for CGI projects was not really there. They hadn't set up their systems to be able to actually do that. The security of working on a major movie release at home, nah, come on. They're not going to do that. Even for something like Death on the Nile, they want to protect that property so it doesn't get pirated. I remember.
I'm surprised though, but it got delayed for a couple of years. That it didn't decide to come back and clean that up a little bit.
But
is it me? Is it, by the way, is it me, or maybe I'm just being overcritical here? Did you find the effects deeply unconvincing and woeful as well?
I don't think they were terrible, but they just reminded me of like 2004.
They didn't look good. That was why I'm saying they're woeful, is because they looked really out of date.
And especially for something like we talked about at the beginning, where it's in the trenches, we've had two very good movies where they delivered very, very realistic trench experiences. Even Wonder Woman had an actually pretty good trench sequence, and it looked good. This looked so often. I find Kenneth Branagh has still not fully gotten rid of his theater thinking, and he sets things and he shoots things and he directs things in a very theatrical way, as in going to the theater rather than a movie. And it's almost like I can imagine him directing Death on the Nile on the stage and not actually having to change that much with how he presents this movie to being on stage, because it's very blocked. It doesn't feel organic, and a lot of his movies have that same problem where it feels like a set, and it's all about the performances. But unfortunately, the performances here were so varied and hinging on two storylines that we didn't care about. Don't care about why Hercule Poirot is the way that he is. We like the way he is, and we don't need or want to know. And the victim is an uninteresting person that we don't really care about. So everything else is just going to hang very loose and saggy, and it's not going to be enjoyable.
It's a fair point. Yeah, he does have a very stagey way of filming
You
stuff,
think
and it kind
about
of works.
did Hamlet or Much Ado About
Or
Nothing.
even it's actually a fantastic observation, because I felt that while I was watching. He directed Thor, right? The first Thor film. And that felt stagey. Every part of that felt like it was staged, even to when Thor came to Earth and it was fight a Annihilator thing.
Yeah.
In the little town. That felt like a stage.
Yeah.
Everything, it didn't feel like a real place.
No.
Even Man of Steel, like with a big horrible fight sequence between Zod and Superman in Smallville. Like a real town, to Zack Snyder's credit. The big fight scene for Thor, I remember watching it going, the first Thor film was kind of like, yeah, all right, okay. But it felt, every part of it kind of felt like it was being filmed on a set.
Yeah.
Would have been perfectly at home on a stage, as you say, for Kenneth
Yeah.
Branagh. The other part of a film I think was problematic, and that's kind of hard to avoid, is the subject matter. It's an old story. It's in the early 20th century, probably, I'm guessing. I should know that, but I don't know. But attitudes towards the people who live in places like Egypt have significantly from Agatha Christie's time. And while I'm certain they've tried to update it and try and scrub out the inherent racism, but only in the film, they even insert a very overt and unsourced LGBT plot in the story, which I actually thought was kind of cool. But
nice.
I had to check that wasn't in the original text. Though over the years, Christie scholars, at least there are Agatha Christie scholars, have interpreted that potentially there is a little bit of LGBT action in there, sort of unspoken because of the time. The attitudes, almost of the colonialism, is inherent in the story.
Yeah.
It still feels like it's there. And it kind of, I criticize woke culture for whatever it is, if you want to call it that, or people who, go a little bit too far in that space. But I couldn't help but feel it was a bit still there in a way that made me feel like all the servants are black, and there's a bunch of really incredibly white people in this boat, except for Letitia Wright, and her mum. But it was a bit, I think they had the same problem a couple of years ago when they did that Tarzan film with Alexander Skarsgård.
Yeah, the Great White Hope is not a good tagline.
It's a problem with making white people in Africa that are set in the early 20th century. Obviously, attitudes were pretty shitty towards, pretty shitty or incredibly shitty towards the people who lived in those countries. Colonialism, but it's hard to tell. I mean, do you want to still want to tell? But I don't think you can entirely remove that from the story itself. And I don't know, part of it's still there, and you kind of go, I don't know about this.
Yeah. For the record, 1937 was when Death on the Nile was first published. Yeah.
So
obviously culture and society has changed a lot in that time. We've had, a couple of world wars, few life-changing, global-changing events here or there across the decades.
Just a smidge.
Just a touch.
It was an interesting decade, the 1930s. There was a bit going on. What the kind of the thing that maybe while I was watching this film, what it kept making me think was, geez, I liked Knives Out. Geez, I mean, I don't know, but I have to assume that Daniel Craig's character in that film is somehow linked back to the Hercule Poirot type character.
Well, there's even that line in Knives Out where he's like, he's one of the dying breed of gentleman detectives. And that's sort of like, okay, so that's just a little wink and a nod to Hercule Poirot, Sherlock Holmes, and things like that, and the legendary characters that are the sort of like, I'm going to sit in a smoking jacket and just tell you all your motivations in front of you.
Or I'm thinking of Mansfield Park with Stephen Fry as a detective at that, and solving the mystery and putting all the pieces together. So that was a more comedic but I think it's that tradition of that kind of character. And I mean, I think it's the second week in a row I've had to call out
Knives Out.
Knives Out for how good it fucking was, because it was really, really, really fucking good. And I'm curious to see how they do it in the sequel and whether they can do it anywhere near as well. But like, they just nailed that, and like, that is what this should have been. I think they take themselves a little bit too seriously here. Maybe they needed a bit of levity in here. Maybe they needed to be less authentic or less in love with the material.
Well, I kind of wonder if maybe there's a certain time period of source material, such as Tarzan, where it's like, okay, you know what? It is highly problematic to set it at the time that it is actually set. Can we utilize the interesting elements of this story and modernize it? Or fuck it, even do it in fucking space if you want to. And just like what they did, we talked about it earlier in the show, in the 90s, where they did the rom-com Shakespeare variations, and Underworld being a bastardization of Romeo and Juliet, doing something like that with Hercule Poirot, and just going, okay, you know what? Instead of Death on the Nile, it's Death on the Star Destroyer.
We could relocate it to Australia, and instead of Death on the Nile, it could be Drunk on the fucking Yarra, mate. It'd just be like a booze cruise that just goes up the fucking river to fucking Warrandyte, mate, and like somebody fucking dropped the fucking keg off the side of a bloody boat.
She's fucking dead. Can't.
They're fucking out of beer, mate. What the fuck? Drunk on the Yarra. It just rolls off the tongue. It just
every week we come out with gold.
It's a gift to the universe, and maybe the universe will make it happen. It would be fucking hilarious. So I'm already thinking there's a famous Australian film called Don's Party about a bunk on the night of the 1972 election. And it's actually an Australian classic, and it's just about a bunch of guys getting drunk and being horrible. And maybe you could just do it at Don's Party on a boat. It would be hilarious. But you're right. Look at Barbed Wire last week was essentially a remake of Casablanca. In post-apocalyptic, future America, but it's tricky to get it right. Maybe it didn't bother many people. I don't know. It was one of the, and probably if I'd have been enjoying it more, I probably wouldn't have been thinking about it.
And I reckon when you get Kenneth Branagh, he has made it his legacy to respect the source material of everything that he has ever adapted or translated to the stage or to the screen. And kudos. I'm sure this is a very good representation of the book. But at the same time, that is not necessarily what's going to work. I think this is tailor-made for the older generation who miss Hercule Poirot, who want to be able to go to the cinema and not have lots of special in-your-face special effects, and not have something that's in space, and not have something that's about superheroes or horror or anything like that. So where are the classics?
No, I think you're right.
It's
definitely, and I think remember when Matt, that was actually an observation of people like the film and did quite well, and did quite well with 40-plus-year-old people who want to go to the cinema too and see a good story. But you're right, the vast majority of cinema now is really targeted at a younger audience, and not to say that older people aren't into Marvel as well, but they're not the core audience for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that there are fewer and fewer. I mean, it's a different world now to when the first one of these came out, but there are fewer and fewer stories made for these type of people. And so I understand the appeal. That's why I was curious to watch it when it came out. Landed straight to Disney Plus very quickly here in Australia after Available Fox, and I get it. It's a good idea. I just think it needs to be executed better than this if they want to do any more of it.
Absolutely agree. Now,
speaking of executing things well,
segue back. Well done.
Smooth. We have had one of my favorite, a new season, one of my favorite TV shows has just started in the last month. That is the final season of Call Saul. This is the 6th season, and as I said, final season. And almost didn't get it. Poor old Bob Odenkirk had a heart attack in the middle of production, but thank God he's a treasure. We still have him. And this is still, I think, I talked a few weeks ago about how I think Severance might be the best TV show that's been on that I've seen since Breaking Bad. This would be in that conversation as well. I know you weren't a massive fan of Breaking. I don't think you ever got around or got into Breaking Bad. So it's a damn shame. I hope you do find a way.
I've watched half of season 1, maybe got to season 2, but I made the mistake of trying to smash through it just to get from one end to the other. That is not a show that you smash through.
No, it's one at a time. I think it's not binge watching. But I think most people generally agreed that Breaking Bad is would be in that conversation with The Wire and The Sopranos. Generally, your top 3 TV shows of all time. Maybe the odd one here and there as
well. What about
other people like to. Never watched an episode. I watched 3 episodes of that, and I'm like, this is terrible. What do people like about this, apart from the fact that they get naked a lot? I think the final season of that is probably taking it backwards a few pegs. I think
even for the most diehard Game of Thrones fan, season 5 and 6 didn't really happen. Denied.
I know some very diehard people who are like, no, I'm sorry, you've lost me after that final episode, and they won't go it. And they're out now. They're not like, I'm not going to watch the prequel series or whatever it is they're working on their HBO. Yeah, they're not going to. Did he ever finish that book? Did he ever finish the fucking next?
No, it still hasn't come out. The final book.
Yeah,
no.
Great. Just get on with it, mate. But anyway, Better Call Saul. I mean, I've said it before in the show. Spin-off series that live up to or surpass the original series, pretty rare. Look, maybe there's some out there I don't know about or I haven't heard about. This, I think, is the finest spin-off series that I can think of it's ever been made. It is in the conversation to being as good as Breaking Bad. I think maybe it's not quite there, but maybe that's just because Breaking Bad sort of came out of left field from the rest of us. Bryan Cranston, the guy from fucking Malcolm in the Middle. What? And Bob Odenkirk, like that. Who? What? It just kind of came out of nowhere. Maybe it was our expectations were a little higher in this one, but they just keep going from strength to strength to strength. So if you're not watching it at all, so I guess I can spoil it a little bit for you. At the end of season 5, it lands on a bit of a cliffhanger. So who has become the show's central big bad, Lalo Salamanca? There is attempt to assassinate Fring, who is the big bad of Breaking Bad, the Chicken Man, played exquisitely by Giancarlo Esposito. Like, his whole career now is playing Gus Fring in space, in Far Cry. Okay with that. But he is a rival of Lalo Salamanca in the cartel, and they have him killed by having Nacho Varga, who is an associate, played brilliantly by Michael Mando, who lets in the corrupt Mexican police, the Federales, who are there to assassinate and kill Lalo. Unfortunately for Gus, it doesn't go well, and Lalo escapes being killed by the Federales, which sets in the other. I guess the kicker at this is that Jimmy, aka Saul, and his wife Kim have become mixed up in what's going on with Lalo, and so they definitely want. And so at the end of the series, everybody thinks he's dead, but he's not. And now he's pissed off. This time it's personal. And so that's the core drama at the start of this episode. Is Nacho is on the run. The Salamanca clan are out for fucking blood because he's been marked as a traitor. Gus Fring and his associate Mike Ehrmantraut, played again perfectly by Jonathan Banks, are trying to extricate him from Mexico at the same time as trying to consider, what do we do with this guy? If he gets captured and talks, and if they find out it was us who did it, what do we do? At the same time as Jimmy McGill has finally taken the leap and starts trading or practicing law Goodman. He's now answering the phone, Saul Goodman. Rhea Seaborn's again perfect. Kim Wexler is she's almost been the Bryan Cranston character arc over the course of the series, and coming from a straight-laced professional lawyer to Jimmy's corruption has almost completely turned it to the dark side now, and they've got this sketchy plot to get back at Howard Hamlin, who is a recurring character in the series. And so the plot's sort of jumping around between these different elements now of what's going on with Lalo, what's Gus Fring and Mike doing about making sure that they stay safe from Lalo, who's probably out for revenge. Saul and Kim have this schemy little plot to try and undermine Howard Hamlin. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a classic Vince Gilligan of A, B, C, D stories all working in concert together, and they're going to be like the most perfect Venn diagrams, because this corner is going to cross over that corner, and this corner is going to cross over this corner, and then they're all going to collide, I'm sure, at some point in the future. Acting's perfect, the direction's perfect, the cinema. I love the way he shoots. He doesn't direct most of the episodes. The different episodes are directed by different people. The most recent episode of season 6 was directed by Rhea Seaborn herself. That was the episode Hit and Run. But I just kind of think to myself going, they have this very distinctive style of shooting things. And it's almost like it's the Breaking Bad way of filming things. And there must be a book somewhere of it. They use the same cinematographer. I don't do it with different directors every week, but the way it looks is so distinctly Breaking Bad. What we call it, the Gilligan verse. I don't know. It doesn't sound quite that good. It sounds like it should be set on an island with the SS Minnow. But
it's that iconic. Even I know what you're talking about just from my brief stint into Breaking Bad, and it's like everything shot, even in the opening of season where you've got Bryan Cranston working in the car wash. It all kind of feels like an old school noir, and it's kind of got that huskiness to the world that it's just like, even if something is quintessentially clean in that world, it looks dirty. And
it does, yeah.
Everything has got this kind of uncomfortable sort of like you could easily imagine just jumping into anyone's mind, and they've just got, it was a cold, dark night. The wind was howling as the rain beat against my face while I went shopping for cheese. Everyone's got that. Everyone's dealing with shit.
You're right, though. It is almost noirish, but in a New Mexico noir.
Mm.
Maybe that's what we can call it. Albuquerque noir. No, Alba, because he loves, I don't know if he's from around that part of the country, but he seems to love it. Like, he finds the most interesting things we set up. The latest episode starts with a shot of a flower in the middle of a desert and shit going on around it, where the camera pans back and reveals something to our story. And that's the kind of way episodes seem to open, or like a shot of a sun or a desert. We appreciate that New Mexico is a character in this series. Sarah, we operate a non-poking podcast. Thank you very much. Did George consent for poking?
Consent,
Did not.
please.
But New Mexico is a character. The desert Alba character in the show.
Yes.
And that it's one of my favorite characters. I kind of look at that and go, I've heard people who've been there, but it's actually not terribly interesting place to visit. But I'm curious.
Yeah. Well,
The guy, apparently they did have to ask people to stop going to the guy's house that they threw the pizza on. There's an episode you wouldn't have seen where Walt gets mad and he's got a pizza and he ends up throwing it on the roof of a garage, and all the that's up someone's real house, and so they had to tell the tourists to stop going down the street and staying at the front and taking photos of a pizza roof. I would totally go and have my photo taken in front of the pizza roof. I'm sorry, pizza roof house people.
Just as long as you have the same expression on your faces when we went to go and see the big
koala.
Koala, yeah.
On the way to Adelaide 6 years ago.
Can you believe it? I think we need another road trip somewhere.
Another road trip somewhere. Maybe
Canberra.
Somewhere equally lame. Canberra. There you go. Equally lame. Canberra. It's about 6 hours away. So there you go. Yes, maybe we'll do it. If you are from Canberra, if you know someone from Canberra once, is there a particular type of food one would buy in Canberra? Because the trip to Adelaide was 6 years ago, for those who are not long-time listeners. We drove to Adelaide for one reason alone, and that was for a pie floater.
Yes.
And that is a meat pie in pea soup, generally speaking, in a bowl of pea soup. Though they were quite difficult to find in Adelaide. We had to settle for one that was a little bit different. It was a pie floater, and it was delicious, if you remember. And so we drove there for a pie. We turned around and
Sarah agrees. That's a very good reason.
It was a fine reason. I agree. It was a good trip. And we recorded a podcast in Adelaide where I got Dragon Ball and Pokemon confused yet again. Because that's what I do. But so if you know anybody from Canberra, if there's a particular food item or restaurant or something you'd recommend and go, that's super Canberra.
Yep.
Let us know, and maybe
that is quintessential Canberra experience. We want to hear about it.
Oh well, you guys, like, I don't know, whatever it is they serve in Canberra.
Crab juice?
I don't know. It's Canberra, right? They're a bit weird. They're a strange bunch, They sell porn and fireworks illegal, and the roads go in circles. They're very strange people. It could be deep fried porn. I don't know. I don't know what they eat there, and I don't care to know, frankly. But if someone can suggest it, we can see about scheduling our 6 yearly Armchair Producer road trip. But I've waffled on about. I'm only 4 episodes into the last season. There's a bit of a way to go. How many episodes are we getting? We are getting 13 episodes, so we have another 9 to go this season. If you're still on the fence about it, I don't know how you could be, because the hype behind this is hype trains, been going for a number of years now. It's as good as Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad, you will like Better Call Saul. It's as simple as that, and it's Marvel.
Okay,
absolutely. Cool. I'd say I think it might still be the best show on television of any flavor. Period.
There we go.
I mean, a current TV show. Like,
High praise right there. I'm going to finish off the show just with an experience that I had just a couple of days ago. And it was cooperative 2-player, care of Xbox Game Pass, and A Way Out, which is on EA Access. It is
a new game?
No, it came out 2018. And if you remember, around that time, there was a bit of a slew of games where it was you cannot play it unless you have a second person. And this one is 2 players, either local or via online. And it's directed, it got a bit of notoriety because of the director, Joseph Fares. He was at the Game Awards and he very, very enthusiastically just said, fuck the Oscars, when he got his award for Best Original Narrative Story in a Video Game or something like that. And this is an interesting game that I do recommend people experience a little bit because it's a fairly rare and unusual thing. Like I was saying, there was a bit of a slew of this type of game. Like there was Wolfenstein Youngbloods, which was that 2-player co-op game where if you bought a copy, you could kind of gift a second copy to someone to play at the same time so that you could do
I'm not surprised they were giving that game away, considering how bad it was.
Yeah, it was not a great game. And Joseph Fares recently released another game that has been getting a little bit of headlines. It's I'm trying to get it here. It's called It Takes Two, which is another.
Well, that was highly, highly acclaimed. It won Game of the Year, I think.
It at least nominated. Yeah, I don't know if it actually won, but
no, it definitely. I believe it did.
There we go.
It's now being turned into a film.
Oh yeah, I heard that actually. Yeah. But A Way Out is a prison break game, and prison inmates Vincent and Leo initially clash, but after Vincent helps Leo win a fight, they warm up to each other and decide to escape together. Leo is a gangster raised in an orphanage and a life of crime with a wife and son who finished 6 months of his 8-year sentence. Vincent is a new arrival, an ex-banker with a pregnant wife, but his hunger for money brought him in a life of organized crime, and because of that, he's serving 14 years for murder and fraud. Leo plans to escape, get revenge on his boss Harvey for setting him up, and Vincent wants to help, but Leo wants to do this on his own. Vincent reveals that he also wants to get revenge on for the murder of his brother. They form an alliance and work together to get out of prison and kill Harvey once and for all. This is an interesting game, and I was playing this with my good friend Eric, who he's a shit, frankly. He was playing Leo, and I was playing Vincent, and there was, as the blurb said, there's the fight that my character got into, and everything plays at the same time. The split screen, you see your side and their side. While I was having my ass handed to me, he was seeing if he could do pull-ups. And it was literally just him just hanging there pushing X, and just over his right shoulder he could see me having my ass handed to me. So I'm talking to him, it's like, come and save me, you fucker. It's like, one more. It was stupid. It's like an interactive movie, which is an interesting experience. And there's a sequence we're still in early game. Apparently it takes about 6 to 8 hours to finish the game. We played for, I think, an hour and a half or so. And you have to steal something and leave it, and one of you will run distraction while the other one goes and steals something and sneaks back and that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of, this is really stupid, like push X and then rotate the analog stick round and round and round to undo screws so that you can move the toilet seat to escape and things like that. While the other person plays lookout and like says, "Oh, watch it, put it back," and things like that, which are cheesy but okay. There's other bits that are just downright stupid. You have to scale this ventilation shaft, and it's like, oh, I said to Eric, "Oh God, are we going to do the back-to-back thing?" And then on cue, so like, "Yeah, let's lock hands and do back-to-back," and you have to kind of do everything in synchronization, otherwise you fall. And so it's really tempting to, the higher you get up, you see the top, and it's like, oh, I'm going to purposely drop us, and you just hear, oh, ah! And it's just comically bad. But then there are bits that actually work really, really well. And we did notice after we actually escaped the prison and we were kind of sneaking through bushes, taking out guards, we were actually starting to just organically coordinate. So there's merit to this narrative story, but I just don't think that this story gets there. This is kind of a proof of concept, I guess. And I'm now curious to play It Takes Two, because he now Joseph Fares now knows, or at least seems to know, how to utilize that mechanism and that mechanic to elicit the right activity, and especially in something where apparently it's a story about separating parents and things where there's a lot of emotional investment. It just made me very curious, and I just wanted to share my early thoughts on this.
I remember watching people play it on Twitch,
Mm.
and I remember them liking the co-op, but a lot of the gameplay was a bit tedious.
It's
not me saying, it's just what I recall people complaining about or watching them do it. But I guess this director's trying to do in it. Nobody makes games like this. This was its own genre once upon a time. Like I assume you're playing this remotely in other places, but I don't know if it's a couch co-op.
Yes,
part of it or not.
You can do couch co-op as well.
But nobody makes games like that anymore.
Not really.
It's all you need to be played anonymously, killing people on a battle royale server or something.
Yeah.
Yes, you can Overwatch, or you could play with friends while you're playing Call of Duty or Battlefield or whatever. But just a game you actually literally be, which you work together. The only one I can think of recently is Cuphead, which was just ridiculously hard.
Yeah.
I love the aesthetic. It was basically unplayably hard for me.
I'm not good at games.
Like
That's what I tell everyone, and I stand by that fact. Unless
I don't have time to get good. I don't have time to get good. So like I just actually, I only switch my Xbox on once in a blue moon these days. So I just don't have time for it really. And there's been no real like that game's coming out that you really want to play. And the worst part about it is you switch it on for the first time in 2.5 months, and it goes, before you do anything, I need to download a fucking 5 gig update for every single game you own. See you later in a couple of days. I just wanted to stick. I heard there was an update for No Man's Sky, and I wanted to stick 10 minutes and have a look at that. But no, 13 gigabyte update.
Huge update. Huge. It's gonna be huge. I just wanted to.
Anyway, I mean, maybe if you want to give a game like It Takes Two a go, because really good things about it.
Yeah, well, if it comes to Game Pass, I'll keep an eye, and we can play it together.
Yes, I think it's on Game Pass, is it not, or not? Maybe it isn't. I thought it was, but I'll double check.
I don't know.
Maybe it's on EA Play or something.
Yeah. Okay. It Takes Two. Boom.
You might need the Ultimate subscription, which I'm not paying for because I just don't. I just don't. I don't play enough games these days. It's kind of part of your job to play games, really.
Yeah, I'm curious whether I'm going to be able to actually kind of do that as a tax write-off.
I think you should be able to. Yeah.
And all of my pop finals and figures.
I don't know about pop finals, but like I know when I worked very briefly in the games industry for about 2 weeks, like I bought all the guys who worked there told me that they claimed tax.
So like, oh, they're essential for my gaming.
No, it's like I make video games, so I need to know what's current in the industry.
I need to look at them out of the box, honest, and just say whether they're worthwhile.
No, it was taken well advantage of in that industry. Let me tell you.
All right. I'll take a look at it, and if it is on there, I will have a look tonight, and I'll let you know.
For sure.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to talk about this week?
I think we should wrap it up. It's gone 2 hours, and I didn't expect it to. Probably because of our 20-minute Netflix rant. Apologies to listeners and viewers everywhere for that one. Just sometimes these things happen; they just slip out.
You just have to talk about them sometimes.
But
thank you
next
so
week.
much.
So I'm going to say next week we're going to be talking about the 2005 Fantastic Four movie, which George is obviously looking forward to with that face. And I will be seeing Doctor Strange on Monday night. We'll be able to have a Strange cast next week.
Strange spoiler cast. Yes. I am by next week. I will have watched The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be great.
Cool. Looking forward to your.
Yeah. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this week. Thank you, Siren Divine. Thank you for Sarah and Michelle for both popping in on the chat there. Really do appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel, twitch.tv/thefriedbrain, youtube.com/armchairproducers, facebook.com/armchairproducers, facebook.com/friedbrainproductions, at the Fried Brain on Twitter, at Evil Trav on Twitter. I think that's everything.
I think that's all the socials.
That'll do for the social.
And as always, if you and you think I'd love to hear those guys talk about a thing, remember we do request if you have a good reason, just talk to Siren Divine. She made us do the thing the other week, so don't forget about that.
Yep, it's the name of the movie and the reason why. Doesn't have to be because it's amazing. It can be because it's trash. Good reason. A good reason is all you need. Until next week, thank you very much.